A warm welcome to you all. Thank you for tuning in to this transmission, Crulee podcast. I have Kitty and Johnson from Sex with My Ex podcast. And, when I found the podcast, when I do find a podcast, I like to sift through the episodes. So maybe I'll click on one episode, listen to it for 10 minutes, and then maybe I'll skip to another episode. And yeah, like what we were just saying before this, um, before we started this recording, was just how intriguing, fascinating, creatively, you both express all things sex. And I think these are things that every individual, like most individuals, think of, but don't really bring it to the forefront, to the light, and actually discuss it with anyone else. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And could you please introduce yourselves for those listening or watching who may be unaware of who you both are and the work you are currently doing?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you very much for having us on, and thank you for the work that you're doing, creating these spaces. Look, chivalry ain't dead, so ladies first. Kitty, I'll let you go first, eh?
I knew you
True
were going to say
gentleman.
that. You just trying to make yourself look cool.
Yeah.
Really, you're like, fuck you, bitch. Oh, wait, can I swear on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Please be yourself.
Okay. I should have checked that first.
That's okay.
So yeah, beautiful. My pseudonym is Kitty. I am a holistic wellness practitioner and intimacy and pleasure coach. So I have two businesses. Yeah, one is in holistic wellness, and in that sexual trauma release and stuff like that comes in. I host women's spaces. I also host spaces for male and female and other gender identifying. And then I also co-own a business alongside Johnson, which is in the sexual wellness sector. I am a mum of three beautiful kitties. I live here in the Bay of Plenty. I like pole dancing and shibari. There you go.
Hmm.
Oh,
That's
and I
great.
also co-host a podcast. Yeah. So prior to creating the sexual wellness business, Johnson and I think we're 20 episodes into the Sex with My Ex podcast, which is nothing holds back really in it. It is all things sex. It is vulnerable. It is dirty. It is funny. And we've been so delighted by the guests we've had on it. And we really feel like this space needs to be here. And it's called Sex with My Ex because Johnson and I are actually exes.
Right. And I'm interested to hear about how you both met when you were younger and what that whole experience was like for both of you.
Oh, oh, fuck. I was a fucking mess. Yeah, that's a good question for you, Johnson, actually. What was your first impression of Kitty?
Uh, wha- I mean, we were young, right? We were full of the hormones were doing crazy things at that age, and so a lot of it was down to physical attraction. Initially, in terms of first impressions. I will say too, whilst I think you're batshit crazy, you're still a gorgeous woman. So that hasn't changed. You're just a bit less of a mess than you were at that age, I suppose. And so am I, which, thankfully, given what we do now. But no, I mean, you've always been very, intelligent, articulate, compassionate, and empathetic, and like I said, I don't think any of that's changed over the years.
Oh,
What do you think things didn't work out back then for the both of you?
Episode 5 and Sex with My Ex really goes into that. Yeah. So we were young, guys. Like we were 13 and
13,
14, I
14,
think, when
15
we
years,
first
somewhere
met.
around there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think it was really cute. We had a really cute little relationship going on. We experienced our first sexual debuts with one another. So the first time we actually had sex was with each other. And look, I had a lot of traumatic shit that had happened in my life that I was really suppressing and I didn't understand, which led to some extremely self-sabotaging behavior. And I think essentially was just but neither of us really knew what to do with anything we were feeling, and a lot of shit in both of our lives, and kind of got to the point where we couldn't really hold that within the relationship anymore. Was that how you would describe it, Johnson? I think, like, for me, I feel like I sabotaged it, to be honest. Yeah, it was really from a place of not feeling very good about myself. There was some self-harm going on. There was some kind of suicidal behavior happening. And poor wee 14-year-old Johnson, I think, didn't really know what to do with that.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I just, you know, and I know Kitty doesn't mind us sharing this, it's in the public domain anyway, but, you know, there were some mental health issues going on as well, you know, and some sort of trigger warning, self-harm stuff as well.
Yeah.
From Kitty's end. And yeah, I wasn't equipped with the tools at that age to deal with that. And then if on top of that, I was an angry young man who didn't really feel like I fit in anywhere. You know, I wasn't Kiwi by birth. I played football, or soccer as we call it here in New Zealand. And of course, at high school, that was quote unquote a gay sport. You know, I was very academic. So like in the debating team, and you know, I enjoyed playing in a band. And yeah, whilst I had a girlfriend in Kitty, sort of being in and around girls and chasing girls wasn't really my thing. I was whilst I enjoyed our relationship, you know, it was part of my life, but I wanted to play in a band, and I wanted to conquer RockQuest, and I wanted to be the youngest player to get picked for the first 11 football team, and I wanted to become the Ducks at school, and I wanted to become the chief of the Air Force when I was older, and a military pilot, and do all these things. And, you know, a lot of that stuff I actually went on to do at great cost to me, spiritually and emotionally, and we might get to that at some point perhaps. But I was an angry young man because I didn't feel like I fit really, because I wasn't just playing rugby and wanting to hook up with girls all the time. And so kind of combined with that anger, and then this just, holy shit, my girlfriend's going through all this crazy stuff and I'm not equipped to deal with it. I kind of freaked out and ran away.
Yeah.
Wow. And how about like moving forward from that? Like, how was the connection reestablished? And whose idea was it to start the podcast?
So it was probably about 5 years ago, Johnson, when I think what we've worked out is that I think you reached out to me. It was like my birthday or something, which is funny because it was on my 14th birthday that we first had sex. So it's like our sex anniversary. But I think it was just really small talk. And I was coming, I think, was I still with my ex-husband? I think I was coming out of that marriage, and I was kind of in this lost period of my life. And I was like, fuck, trying to, you know, find my own identity again. And who am I? And, you know, when you go into that reflection period after really big things in your life, I kind of started looking back, and I often thought of Johnson and thought about of our time together, and held a lot of regret and shame around how it had kind of ended and who I was at that point. So we kind of started this friendship. Like the first time we really reconnected, which was about 5 years ago, I remember he said to me, "Is that God, do you want to chat on the phone?" And fuck, it was like 3 hours or something.
Yeah.
Like we were just like yarning. So it was so cool. And we kind of stayed in that space. We'd kind of connect every now and then. And then you were coming out of your marriage, and there was a lot of stuff we could relate to with one another. And then little did I know you had been on this whole journey. I was already in the holistic wellness space, and I did an Instagram live to men, addressing men and saying, I want to help you, and I don't know how. I have had this nudge really deep in my soul that I could be doing as much work as I like with women, but if we don't address the wounds and the needs of our men and, you know, other agendas outside of that, but that was really that calling for me, then we're not fucking going anywhere. And I said, if you are like in these spaces, or you know of things I can do to help, please reach out to me. And Johnson was one of the people that reached out to me, which was actually the beginning of the conversations that led to the podcast. So it essentially came from a desire to support men's mental health. And then realized we had a lot in common. So yeah, then you had a whole story that was going on that I didn't really know about, eh?
Yeah. Look, and I think it's important to point out too that I don't feel like at any point, I mean, because we obviously lost touch for quite a while. I mean, what, 10 years or even longer?
Longer, yeah.
There was never a loss of respect for each other. We just
Yeah.
completely lost touch.
Yeah.
And then when we reconnected, it's funny because there was never any of that romantic feelings either way, but just a deep respect and honor for each other and each other's journeys. And I mean, I would say, and I hope Kitty would agree with this, that over the last few years, reconnecting and now ultimately owning a business in the sexual wellness and education space and the podcast, we've become, I mean, she's one of my best friends, you know,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
and I love and adore the woman, absolutely love and adore her, but there's nothing romantic about it. It's from a place of deep respect and friendship, and shared experience too. So I think that's worth pointing out. But yeah, it was funny, and we've always both of us have always been quite, shall I say, extroverted people. I always describe Kitty when people ask me what she's like. I always say that she is a lot of person.
Well done, yeah.
As that laugh demonstrates, you know, she's a lot of person, and I mean that in a good way. You know, is vocal about the things she's passionate about, has a big heart, a really beautiful spirit as well. But there's a tenderness underneath that loud laugh too, and yeah. So and I've always felt I've been able to be very open with her because she's very non-judgmental and very open and listens really well. And so I've been blessed, I suppose, with some very interesting sexual experiences over my life. I don't sit within a typical relationship structure. I've been open to exploring all sorts of the weird and wonderful dishes that are on the buffet of sexuality that the world has got to offer. A lot of those things I found I've enjoyed, and I've kept them up, but always from practicing them from a very conscious, consensual place and place of love. Even some of the more quote unquote hardcore or quote unquote scary stuff. And so it naturally came up in conversation with Kitty. As well, and of course we had the shared experience of having our sexual debuts with each other. So of course we're reflecting on that. And I'd actually gone through a program that deals with men's anger issues in particular during the time we were kind of reconnecting, or maybe a couple of years down the line. Certainly around the time Kitty put that post out asking for men to step in and help her. And one of the things that I'd identified listening to other men sharing in these groups is that a lot of them were really frustrated with their own inability to express themselves sexually in the way that they really wanted to in the depths of their heart. They didn't necessarily have the tools or the language to express to partners what they wanted sexually. They looked at sex as like a means of conquest. You know, like, oh, if I fuck heaps of bitches, then I'm one of the boys, you know, and that's the kind of language they were using. And I was quite shocked by that because I've never, you know, and I was like, whoa. And especially in New Zealand, I was like, man, we need to equip these men with the tools because, man, I don't care how staunch you are. When no one's looking and there's no shame and there's no judgment, if you're in love with that woman or in love with that man or however they identify, and it's the two of you and it's been a long week and you've got that time, like, who doesn't love snuggling up to their beloved and having that quality intimate time, you know? Like, the hardest of the hard men are teddy bears in that situation. And I was like, so why aren't they expressing it? Like, where's the, we've lost our sensuality. And And I kept coming back to this place. And this is really where we decided, like, fuck it, we need to do a podcast and ultimately start a business to teach some of this stuff is, and we use tools like Tantra just as tools, right, to help facilitate this. But I kept coming back to, it's a loss of mana, like we've lost our mana, and in that we've lost our sensuality as well, because there's
Vulnerability.
strength in that. So probably a long-winded answer to your question, my friend, but yeah, that's kind of how it was all born, and how we reconnected and realized we were on the same page, and kind of what we're about.
Can I change the language on one comment you've just said?
Yeah, please, absolutely.
I don't think you lost anything. I think it was taken from you. I think that societal conditioning, I think that this patriarchal setup, which is coming from a wounded masculine, I think it was taken from you, just like things were taken from me. I believe that as male identifying, that's not spoken about enough. You've been raised in a society that doesn't value your vulnerability, your emotions, your own mental well-being, your souls. And there's this whole concept of what a man should look like, particularly in New Zealand, that is really, really, really damaging. And I think that it would be really nice to change the language away from something that you lost. You didn't do anything. It's not your fault. I think it was taken. And I'd really like us to acknowledge that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was also going to say something along those lines of conditioning, like perceptually, what a man is, how we need to be in relation to others when we're around people, when we're in society itself, like the way that we act. Like I often think about how much is a person them, and how much is a person a byproduct of just society itself, right? So I think that's so important to recognize. And also what Johnson said about having ex-partners and just having deep love and deep respect for them. I've actually experienced something like that as well. Like I was in a teen relationship, and things didn't go well, similar to your both of your stories. And we reconnected about 6 months ago, and she gave me a tattoo, and it was just it was so great to see her doing well, and her business flourishing, and just connecting with her in that space while she was giving me that tattoo. And there was just deep love and care, and just a genuineness about being with her, and just sharing space with her. So yeah, like I completely understand what you're saying. And for you, Kitty, when like you spoke about what's inspired your passion, well, what has inspired your passion, like to work in the space of holistic wellness, mental health, and body acceptance?
I grew up none of those things, not accepting my body, not being holistically well, feeling a massive disconnect from my sexuality, from who I was as a person. I had a lot of shame. I had experiences early on in my life that left me with feelings of unworthiness. And I clawed my way back to sanity, and it was not fucking easy. And I went down all of the tracks. I have been diagnosed with depression, with prenatal depression, postnatal depression, high functioning anxiety disorder. And I had sought some support. I was that kid at high school that was always hanging out in the counselor's office. Like just like, oh, where's Kitty? Oh, she's just doing her thing. And I will say I had a fantastic counselor when I was diagnosed with postnatal depression after my second bubs. That was probably about 7 years ago now. And I still kind of felt like there was something more. I was like, okay, I've kind of gone down the mainstream avenues for support in myself, and I knew there was more. So about 7 years ago, I started reading personal development books. I picked up all the books I could get my hands on. I started surrounding myself with people that were really like-minded. And the more that I learned about psychology, the more I learned about social conditioning and all of these things, I was like, fuck, this is what people don't know. Like, there are all these things sitting here just in like reprogramming the brain, and that people are just not aware of. We're not taught in school. You know, my background is actually in education, and youth work and stuff like that. And there just was this huge gap. And so I just allowed my kind of personal development journey and spiritual development journey to unfold, which then led me into becoming a Reiki practitioner, working alongside the holistic being. And then that naturally unfolded to part of our holistic self, which is our sexual self. And I, over the last couple of years, went on a journey of sexual liberation. You know, I definitely had been in that shame and had experiences of sexual assault to some degree, and when I was younger. And again, all wrapped up on my self-worth. And I just remember thinking, like, I want to feel deep connection with others. I want to feel good in myself, and did a lot of work on myself. Like, I have fucking cried a lot in the last few years. I have screamed a lot. I have felt fucking lost. However, the practices that I brought into my life, like meditation and breath work and having really incredible people around you and energy work, I saw the difference in my life. And I was like, okay, if this can happen in my life, it can happen in anyone's life, and we need more people to support it. And I've always been one to talk about the gnarly shit. You know, I've always been someone that isn't afraid to talk about the shadows and talk about death and talk about sex. And I thought, well, I already don't mind talking about it, and I really want to help people. I might as well step into this space. And stepping into the space has felt very natural, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Like, I've had episode 2 was Kushla Robinson, and she was in New Zealand foster care and experienced like just the most traumatic sexual abuse, and just to hear about her working through her traumas, her shadows, doing the great work. It's so inspiring. Like, it inspires me to hear about other people working through their shadows, like their trauma, like the dark experiences they've had in their life, and just to like transmutate the shame, the guilt, the fear, the low self-esteem. So that, like, I get passion, I get energy, I get drive from that. So I really appreciate you sharing that with me.
Thank you. Thanks for holding the space for it.
That's okay. Hey, Johnson, before this transmission, you were telling me about how you're in a non-monogamous relationship. What does it mean to be in one of those?
Yeah, interesting question. Look, anything sexuality or relationship related, if you like. I always talk about the buffet, right? I talk about the buffet of sexuality, relationships, love. We all express ourselves differently. Now, we use certain bits of language to find our tribe, for example, kinksters, or, the reclaimed slut movement, or, gay daddies, or we use all of these words, right, to sort of find our tribe. And the kind of non-monogamous world is much the same, in that there's different flavors of it, right? I guess and this is a poor way of saying it, because my point is that language can be a little bit clumsy, but you've got polyamory, I suppose, on one end, which is where you'd have multiple committed, loving relationships. And even within polyamory, there's different flavors of polyamory, which I won't go into here. But and then you've got swinging, which, when people hear that word, they often think about like back in the 70s, purple satin shirts undone, hairy chests, car keys in the fruit bowl, that kind of carry on. That's it. And that's more about having not so much other committed relationships, but engaging in sexual activities with other people, mostly together. Again, within the swinging world, there's different flavors too. And then there's perhaps what you'd call open relationships, as in being able to have other sexual partners, or some, especially in America, they call it having a hall pass. So I've never been polyamorous per se, but I've definitely experienced non-monogamy, and with a few of the other flavors. And the way my world currently looks is that I have a primary partner whom I'm actually engaged to, a really beautiful, beautiful woman whom we call Mrs. Johnson.
We love Mrs. Johnson.
She's an epic human being. Now, we, for a fair while, were, I guess, what you'd call swingers, as in, we engaged in, we had sexual connections with other people together. She decided end of last year, start of this year, that actually she wanted to sort of remain monogamous with me. So we both identify as what you'd call romantically monogamous, as in we're each other's only primary committed loving partners. But she wanted to remain sexually monogamous as well. And that was all groovy. We were sexually monogamous for quite a while. And then she said to me, she said, look, like, I know that you enjoy having sexual connections with other people. There's certain things I'm into that isn't necessarily her soup of the day. And she was like, see, she feels a lot of compersion when I have those experiences, because we have such an honest, open style of communication. Like there's zero secrets, and there can't be if one of these kind of relationships is going to work for someone. And I will interject there and say that non-monogamy is not for everybody.
Yeah.
It's absolutely not for everybody. But so anyway, she said to me, she's like, go and have those connections. Obviously there's a framework that we stick to. We have, really firm boundaries. We have certain rules that we respect. We check in all the time. She knows about everybody I'm catching up with. If she ever asks questions, I answer honestly. She always has access to all my phone messages. Of course, I communicate this with other potential partners as well. And so that's kind of what it looks like at the moment. Now, does that mean that I'm out having sex with whoever I want, whenever I want, all of the time? Absolutely not. Yeah, so but on occasion I get to express myself in ways that I enjoy with people that enjoy those specific ways as well, that falls outside of my relationship, and it's done out of a place of love and respect, heaps of communication, and to just complete honesty, and it works for us, and the thing is, we both know that if it ever stops working for us, if there's any discomfort, it stops, and we reset and we renegotiate the boundaries and move on. And I think that's a lesson any relationship can take, regardless of whether it's monogamous or non-monogamous, right? It's all about always coming from a place of, as Kitty would say, like respect, trust, and love.
Yeah. The foundation.
Right. Yeah. So what do you think like separates monogamous and non-monogamous relationships, like at an individual level? Like why are some accepting and others aren't? Like what do you think is going on there?
Do you mean in terms of the reasons people do it, or kind of more generally?
So let's say I want to swing, or I want to add an extra person into the sex life, but the let's say my partner doesn't. Like, what have you noticed in non-monogamous people versus monogamous people, or monogamous relationships? Like, what's the difference?
I think, well, yeah, that's a really rich topic. Actually, a lot of it a few things that come to mind straight away is our worldview. Now, I use the term worldview very specifically. A lot of people use the word religious, and the word religious or religion has been bastardized somewhat. So I am, and this surprises a lot of people, I am absolutely 100% Christian.
I love that response.
Oh man.
And that really does surprise a lot of people. But yet I practice tantra, I practice meditation, and I am into yoga. I believe that we're spiritual beings that are ultra complex. I believe in manifestation. I'm non-monogamous. I'm into BDSM. The other night I played with a partner who absolutely just loved the fact that I could give her welts with a belt on her ass as part of like spanking fun that she could feel the next day. But that it was from this place of love and exploring sensation and all these things. And then people go, well, how do you marry that with being Christian, right? the point I'm trying to make is that, I believe that, and this is just my personal belief, so replace this language with whatever feels good to you or your listeners, but I believe that the true divinity is when we are connected purely with Creator, God, whatever language you want to use. I believe that religion is man's attempt to get right with God, and that's where we kind of fuck shit up by creating these institutions that prey on guilt, that
shame,
that become money-making machines that start operating for all sorts of agendas that I don't think are divine or pure. So that's kind of the theological rambling out of the way. So to answer your question, I think worldview determines a lot. A lot of people are terrified about sexuality because of those, and I will use the word religious teachings, doctrines, dogmas, or whatever, and they're terrified of, quote unquote, going to hell for being sexually sinful, and I'm not putting down those worldviews. Like, some people have certain views around sexual purity, and I totally respect that. I totally get that. But for them, non-monogamy is just so far down the don't even want to entertain it spectrum. So there's that. And thankfully this is getting better, but it's hard to find really good resources as well in terms of educating yourself on some of this stuff. Thankfully that's changing. There's really good podcasts out there. There's great YouTube channels. There's some really good blogs. There's good websites. You have to do a bit of digging though, because if you just start Googling swinging, for example, there's a whole bunch of really sleazy stuff that comes up straight away, right? So you kind of have to filter through that too. And so I think that's a barrier to entry into what we call the lifestyle, quote unquote. For other people, it's their own shame about bringing up that desire or interest with their partner. Like, how is my partner going to respond? Are they going to think that I don't think they're enough? Are they going to get angry at me for having fantasies or desires or interests, or just wanting to have the conversation? I think there's their own fears or jealousy too. And I'm not judging any of these things. These are just things I've seen. Does that mean my partner's not enough? I'm not enough for my partner? Or what if they fall in love with another person and leave me? Are we actually able to separate, say polyamory wasn't your thing, but say swinging was, or a menage a trois, or whichever flavor you want to use? Can we actually separate the sexuality from catching the feels? So we could sit here for hours and talk about the why monogamy and non-monogamy work for different people. I think at its essence, I go back to it, we all enjoy different dishes from the buffet. Some of us like Chinese, some of us like Mexican, some of us just like meat and 3 veg, and all of those things are great. Some of us, like myself, are greedy and enjoy all the
greedy
things.
Fucker.
I'm just picturing some fat dude at the buffet.
Yeah, that's Johnson.
Packing his plate.
And I think it's just being respectful of each other's kind of design. I go back to I got 2 rules. One is, are you harming anybody? And 2, are you breaking the law? And if you're not, you're coming from a place of love, you're being authentic, you're being honest, you're all good. If any of those things aren't true, there's dishonesty, or it's not from a place of love, then you've got to examine the motivations, right? But that applies to everything in life, not just sex.
You just made a really great segue for a point I wanted to make around this, because it's really, really, really crucial that people that are potentially endeavoring further into their sexual wellness journey, that there is no fucking tick sheet.
Yeah.
There is no, like, if I don't get spanked, or if I'm not a non-monogamous relationship or any of these things, then I'm not sexually liberated. I believe it comes back to the essence of what you just said. And are you acting, communicating, expressing yourself out of fear or out of love? And that can be in both sides of that. Are you in a monogamous relationship out of fear or out of love? Are you in a non-monogamous relationship out of fear or out of love? And it's really looking at how you're showing up in the world and whether it's truly authentic to you. Because I know that I've stayed in both of those 2 places. I predominantly have been in monogamous relationships. I've had an experience in an open relationship. However, it's going like, what is truly authentically me? And am I showing up in my essence? And am I communicating that very clearly, either as a single person or as someone that's going into a relationship or someone that's already in a relationship? Just be you, whatever that is going to be, and you're never going to know places that you could venture unless you have those open discussions with, a potential partner, or if you already got a beloved. But it's just coming back to, like, there is no wrong or right. There is none of that. There's no judgment. Like, it doesn't fucking help us to judge anyone based on their sexual orientation or their relationship status or whatever it is. Like, are your decisions based on true love and respect for yourself, or are they based on fear? If you go forward like that, you'll find the sexual space that most fits you.
Look, in our business, which sits alongside the podcast, but is a different brand name, where we do show our faces and then use our real names and all that sort of stuff. I think it's summed up beautifully in our mission statement, right? And forgive me for being slightly academic here, but we put a lot of thought into each and every word that makes up these sentences, but I think it captures kind of what we're trying to say about as concisely and eloquently as we've been able to. And that is that, we're here to provide safe spaces for you to connect to your sexual being, enabling you to learn more about yourself, dilute your shame, grow in intimacy, feel empowered to explore and discover your deliciousness. And so that's all about connecting with your sexual self and having, diluting the shame around your desire. And we use that phrase, discover your deliciousness, a lot, because my deliciousness probably looks very different to your deliciousness, Jake. We might have a conversation and find out, hey, we've got some things that we find delicious in common. Really cool. We might have very little in common, but that's all okay. It's about finding out what our deliciousness is, and then feeling free and safe to explore that in a yummy, safe, loving, trusting, honest way. And so, yeah, there's no black belt of sex to attain by having, as Kitty says, ticked off all these activities. It's getting rid of comparison, getting rid of judgment.
Yeah, wow, beautifully said by both of you. And I love Kitty, I love how you almost, it's like throwing a dart on a dartboard and hitting the specific spot. Like I love how you penetrate straight to the cause of love and fear, like love and insecurity, and how we operate through a relationship. Because I would agree with everything that you said there, and it was just it's so great to hear other people's like wisdom and insight and knowledge, and to learn and to be able to share that on a platform as well. Is like, I find that to be really invigorating and empowering. And I want to ask you, how would you define intimacy?
Myself?
Yes.
Well, I think there's two elements to it. First is intimacy with self, and then the other part of it is intimacy with another or others. I believe that it only comes from a reclamation of your own intimacy or pleasure that then you can find the most growth in the connection with others. So I believe that intimacy comes from a holistic place, your relationship to your body, your soul, your mind, your sensuality, your sexuality. And I believe that has to be the platform. So how you feel in yourself. I'm a big advocate for self-pleasure. I did a whole episode on it because it's really coming into acceptance. And then from that point, I think the intimacy overflows. And when it comes into, say, connections with others, again, it has to be in its true divine form of intimacy, like a seeing of another, an absolutely judgment-free seeing of another that you're in a connection with. and allowing them to see you. It's being in reciprocity. It is a give and receive, a push and pull. It is a I see you, you see me, like I feel you, you feel me. Here I am, no holding back. Here's my shadows and my light. Like the true gorgeous, take everything else away, all the societal conditioning, all the fucking porn and movies and all that shit. Intimacy, my view is, it's soul connection. It's bearing all of yourself with another so that you can be vulnerable, because the capacity that can happen within those dynamics is self-actualization. I think that you have to be doing the work on yourself, but the connections we can find with others and our most vulnerable is how we learn the most about ourselves. And we learn about society, and we learn about how other people think, and we learn about how to communicate. And there's just so much capacity in that space of connection.
Yeah, it's I think that's good you said that, because like I think the generic understanding of what intimacy is, people think that's like just sex, right, or a kiss, but it goes deeper than just being intimate with someone else. I mean, it really starts with the self. It starts with us, and how we engage in working on ourselves and being connected with ourselves. And you've done an episode on self pleasure, but could you just give us a couple of tools that we could implement in our day or in our week to give ourselves self pleasure?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I would say let go of shame. It's not yours. It's not serving you. Throw it in the fucking bin. Any ideas you've got around it that might have come from your childhood, your background, belief systems that have been around you, your parents, all those places. And a lot of the time that is just uneducated information that's coming to you. This is the perfect example of it. And this is about women's anatomy, but it also refers to men. Like, if we were not meant to experience pleasure, we wouldn't have a clitoris. The only reason we have a clitoris is for sensation. It is not there to create babies. Like, that whole part in the body with the nerves that are there, it is for stimulation. So like, you are a pleasure being. Just accept that, first of all. The other things I would say is, if you are venturing into reclaiming like self-pleasure, or you're deepening into it, really get to know you. Because if you are, say you enjoy senses, you like music, you like particular sensations on the skin, say you like particular toys, you need it to be quiet, you like it to be in the bath, like go into it with this element of curiosity and self-discovery of like, how do I enjoy that? And when you're coming into, say, your relationship with your body, just go easy, babes. Like, all bodies are beautiful. Like, how I encourage health, but we are all different. And that is I think is a barrier for, I will say probably particularly women, a barrier in self-pleasure is their relationship to their bodies. Just go in, even if it needs to be dark, if you need to be in a dark room, maybe then venture into lighting some candles and lighting some more, going to full light, bring in a mirror if you're at the point I am in my self-pleasure. Hello. But yeah, go into it with curiosity. So me personally, I also bring in holistic practices. So I will actually drop into a meditation first, and then I will bring in some breath work sometimes, and then I will have particular music that kind of takes me through. Like 70% of the time, my pleasure practice involves those things. So who are you? Like, what do you enjoy? And bring it into it. And the final tip on it is, do not attach yourself to an outcome. This is for everyone. Like, just like when you're in an intimate connection with someone, like, do not go into it thinking, if I don't come, or if this doesn't happen, or if that doesn't happen, this is a failure, I'm never going to masturbate again. Same with sex, orgasm is not the end goal. Like, pleasure is the experience. Enjoy the journey of it. Like, sometimes I'm a very sexual being. I always orgasm. But I will say there's been other periods of my life where I haven't. Like, go into it without an attachment, connection to the presence of it, but don't attach yourself to how it's supposed to look, feel, sound, any of those things.
Can I tag on to the end there, Kitty?
Yes, I give my consent. Look, practicing consent.
Thank you. The first hot tip I will say is, if your listeners want to head to our website on the blog page, and we can even send you a link to this as well, brother.
Sure.
Kitty did, as part of one of our episodes, she actually did a guided self-pleasure meditation for listeners as well. And we've had amazing feedback on that. We've put it out there as a free resource. So it's got this beautiful music. I think it might have been about 12 minutes long. Don't quote me on that, but it's a still guided meditation that you can use before self-pleasure as well, that just gets you into this most wonderfully delicious headspace, which is awesome, separates us as well from the outcome, and just gets us connected with our body in a really, really delicious way. So hot tip there, that self-pleasure meditation, if that's something that someone's interested in exploring, I would definitely recommend that. So we'll send you the link.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing as well is, Kitty kind of touched on it there, right? About not worrying so much about what it looks like, sounds like, smells like. I mean, how often do we during sex worry about, am I doing this right for her or him? Am I using a technique they enjoy? Do I look good doing this? Do I sound stupid? Like, is the lighting all good? Have I got the right playlist going? And when we're in that space, we're not there.
Right.
Like, we're not present, right?
Not present, yeah.
And the best place to practice that is by yourself.
Absolutely.
And I talk about, like, not performing sex, but being sexual. And so self-pleasure is a really awesome opportunity to practice being sexual. Now, I've been guilty of this. And I think, and I'm going to speak very generally on behalf of penis owners here, so forgive me, lads, but when we think about self-pleasure or masturbation, I think the picture a lot of us get in our head is like, under the duvet, lights off, we don't breathe because, you know, it's that whole, like, you learned it as a teenager, like not being caught, the whole shame thing. It's like, get it done quickly, get the release, like, let's just like come, wipe it up and get on with our day, you know, like, I've had my release, let's crack on.
It's true though, right?
Yeah. Probably during lunch breaks too.
Yeah, exactly. And so if we can, even if it's like once a week, make the time to go, okay, do you know what? Like, I'm not going to put like a time restriction on this. If you want to use a guided meditation, cool. If you want to use candles, cool. I mean, even if you wanted to watch some ethically produced pornography, again, whatever your deliciousness is, do that. But really taking the time and breathing, and rather than kind of, how quickly can I just kind of orgasm and get on with my day? How can I most be present for every sensation that my body feels? How can I most effectively block out all the other thoughts in the world, or acknowledge them and just let them go through, and really be sexual rather than performing a sex act, you know? And I selfless plug here. And if anyone wants to DM us, we, you know, whilst we don't overtly advertise the business itself, we will steer people if they DM us in the direction of it. You know, we're running workshops in the North Island of New Zealand now, teaching exactly this stuff, connecting to pleasure. And honestly, the feedback we've got has been like, it's blown us away.
Yeah.
We've had people within 48 hours of doing the workshops emailing us, and you can almost feel they're in tears writing these emails going, I've had the most ridiculous again, we're not attached to the outcomes, but I've had the most ridiculous orgasms. We had a guy, and he won't mind me saying, we had a couple turn up to one of our workshops. He was skeptical as you can get about, because we incorporate different kinds of tantric practices as well. And we're not purists in that we don't just say there's one type of tantra that works and the rests aren't the true way to enlightenment. No, fuck that. We beg, borrow, and steal little bits from all the things, because we want people to find their deliciousness. We just give them a whole range of tools and go, like, try all this stuff and see what works for you. He was skeptical. He's like, oh, moving sexual energy for like energetic orgasm. And he's like, nah, it's all bullshit. I'm not into any of this. Within 48 hours, they were contacting us, wanting one-on-one coaching sessions with us, so they could learn how to tone down the energy orgasms that he was giving
Because
her.
it was so intense.
Because it had happened and it was so intense, and he was like, I
What
don't
the
know,
fuck?
I don't know how to turn it off. And she was like, he was barely touching her after hours of this beautiful sexual experience they'd had after our workshops, going, she's like, you can't touch me because there's so much of the sexual energy moving. And this guy was totally skeptical. Like, this stuff works when you you ask the question, what is intimacy? It literally means to be close to. And we are mental, physical, spiritual, and sexual beings. And so when we remove the disconnect and we draw close to our sexuality, which particularly for men is hard, it's powerful. It's really, really, really powerful. So it's about learning to be sexual rather than performing sex, and drawing in all these different, like, honestly, ancient techniques. And you can pull this stuff into, like I mentioned before, BDSM, quite kinky, quote unquote hardcore play. Like, you can do that with, I talk about like dominance and submission, for example, as being like a pushing and pulling of energies. And it is. And when you do it from that perspective, like, mind-blowing deliciousness can happen. Again, not for everybody, but it's reframing the way we think about sex and becoming connected to our sexuality and then being sexual. And it's beautiful. And the way that people express it is different and weird and wonderful. And it's a yummy buffet.
It's a yummy buffet. Yeah, man. Like, I agree with you. And like, I've had experiences of, just like being out in like day-to-day life, there's so much sensory information coming on in. And, for me, like, let's say for just your regular Joe, right? Like, they're getting up, maybe they have kids, so they go take them to school, get them ready for school. They have to go to work, and then they come home and they're tired and their mind is just racing. Doing something like Candle's, Kitty's, mindfulness meditation, or music, or a bath, or something just to slow down the mind, meditation, that really puts you in that present state. And everyone's probably had experiences of this, but you can really slow the mind down and become so present during sex that you literally become sex. Like, there is no you, there is no other person. There's just this unification of sensory information, and it's just happening, right? So I would absolutely encourage people to check out Kitty's meditation. It's 14 minutes long.
Really? Oh, is it funny? Yeah. I knew that. How do you know that?
I did listen to it, and I thought it was great, with the breathing, the letting go of the shame. It can make you feel so light, because we're wearing all of this baggage. So to actually go through something like that and just take all these layers of clothing off that are weighing us down, and to actually open ourselves up, be vulnerable, and be willing to engage with ourselves and our intimate partners. So it's great. And like, being in a space to offer guidance for others, like, what would you offer them, like anyone who is experiencing shame? Do you think it's just the meditation itself? Like, what have you both done that have helped with shame and working through that?
I'll probably like put my holistic wellness practitioner head on for this bit, because I have been working within the space of shame for a couple of years now. And it really depends on the person. It depends on what their life experience has been up until then. For some people, daily meditation practice will be beautiful, and that will shift some really big things. Daily breathwork practice, like breathwork practice, was a huge influencer on my well-being in a particular period of my life. However, it depends on the severity of how long that shame, stagnant energy attachment has been sitting in someone's core. If it has been sitting there for a while, and if it is, I would say, if it's also drastically impacting your well-being, your connections, your relationships, I would seek some support. And that can come from a multitude of ways. There are a lot of us in the holistic wellness space. There are also really incredible people that work within, counseling. And I know of some beautiful counselors here in the Bay of Plenty. And I know even that seeking support, especially for men, can be challenging, but it's you either live the rest of your life the way that you are now, or you do something that's slightly uncomfortable and potentially live a life that is so much more liberated. So seek some support. You know, people like Johnson and I that are working in these spaces, I have personally witnessed the most fucking incredible things when people are coming together in circles. So I run a regular women's retreat every couple of months. And as part of that retreat, we actually do a body presentation. So that is literally undressing yourself down to however you feel comfortable. But it's fascinating because all of these women are almost completely or completely stripping themselves, and they are sharing the shame stories of their body. And this is a comment that comes up regularly in our podcast and with the business, is that shame becomes diluted when it is shared in safe spaces. And there are so many safe spaces that are popping up, and there are online. I really do encourage in person personally, for like the deep shame stuff, the really nitty gritty trauma stuff. Like in person can be life changing because you get the hug, you know, you get those moments of connection, you get the eye contact, all of those things. There are spaces that continue to come up where we're being held. And what I find keeps happening when I'm facilitating spaces is that when we start to tell our stories, we realize that although we don't have exactly the same stories, the threads that are woven between them creates enough of a foundation that we feel like we can relate, that we feel like we're not alone, that we remember that we're all in this life together, you know, that we're all living in the grind, and we've all got histories, and we've all got fears, and we've all got insecurities, and we all hold judgment on things, and that's okay because we're human, and there is no perfect version of a fucking human being. You know, we're all in the journey, and there's no final destination to the journey. But when you come into spaces to share and dilute some of that shame, then you get to feel supported and held, and you also get to witness other people doing the same. And I know that some people wouldn't be ready for that, and that's why I say scaffold yourself and take the steps. But I'm a big advocate for doing what feels right to you, but knowing there's so many things available. You know, I don't know if you guys relate, but I have felt really fucking lonely in periods of my life where I haven't felt like there's anyone that understands or there's anywhere to go. And sometimes just breaking through that, asking friends and family for their support, or places they can recommend as well. Yeah.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, I think even for me personally, like being in spaces where you can just be you, right? And
Yeah.
that's it's like being in an empty space. Like I talk about offering empty space quite a lot actually, and it's just such I think it just provides everyone what they need. You know, we all need just an empty space to be ourselves. So I've found great healing and great connection in spaces and circles and groups that do offer something along those lines that you offer in the retreat. So that's beautiful. And thank you so much for working with people and sharing your gifts and your talents and your insight and your passion with others. It's incredible. It really is. So I really appreciate you doing that.
Thank you. I would probably just say one other thing that came to mind as you were speaking. And, you know, if you are wanting to grow as a person, I invite you to be really fucking radically responsible with your environment, what you're consuming, like your diet, your social media, all of those things, the people that you're around. You know, just really look at yourself and your life and go like, is this really serving me in my highest good? You know, are these practices, these behaviors, the people I'm surrounding myself with? Science tells us, research proves that we are influenced drastically by the 5 people that we're around the most. We are drastically impacted by our environment. Like at the end of the day, you're the one that has to sit with you and who you are in this world, you know, and I think that's really challenging for some people. I know that I have known that my growth path will lose me people, and it has lost me people, and like send them love to them in their journey. But yeah, I just, for anyone that is just wanting to not just within the space of sexuality, but personal development, take some radical responsibility for the things in your life right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I second that, you know, and obviously giving advice, I mean, you've got to penetrate that into your own life, like your own experience. So it feels good to actually offer something, like offer some advice and actually be doing it as well. So thank you for that. And like I've contemplated while being single whether like the regular use of sex toys has a negative impact, like a negative sexual impact with others. So what are your thoughts on this? And should we be mindful on the regularity of our sex toy use?
Can I jump in on that, Kitty?
I was going to say, you, funnily enough, you actually probably have more sex toys than I do, which is hard to beat.
It's an interesting one, right? And it comes back to intention, but I'll circle back to that. There's a lot of, if we think, okay, we'll start with just the physical. There's a lot of myths out there that overuse of sex toys can literally numb the body, numb us from pleasure. For example, there's been myths going around for decades that use of vibrators for women can literally numb their clitoris so that they have less sensation going forward. And all of it's bullshit. It's been completely proven now that it's just not the case. So you're not going to desensitize anything. So that's the kind of the physical myth out of the way. But I come back to intention, right? And it's why are you using them? And if it's to connect with your own pleasure or your own sensuality or sexuality, or you're using them, say, with a partner for those reasons as well, or to enhance sensation and draw you closer, then absolutely fucking go for it. Like, you're not going to get addicted to sex toys. If, and this goes for anything, if it becomes a barrier to genuine connection with yourself or with somebody else, then it's probably not the sex toy. There's probably something deeper beneath that's causing that struggle for deep connection, again, either with our own intimacy or intimacy with others. So sex toys, like anything on the sexual buffet, are neither good nor bad. It depends on the intentionality with which we approach them. You know, I used the example before about a belt. If I walked up to you with no consent, no pre-warning, no negotiation, no discussion first, and whacked you with my belt, we're going to have a pretty feisty conversation, I'd say.
I'll punch you in the cock.
Yeah. Now, if it's done as part of a really well thought out sensory experience that's negotiated with a really loving or interesting exploration intention behind it, and that sensation's being applied for good reasons, and I'm not talking about masking emotional trauma or any of that stuff, that's a whole nother topic, you know, and it's good intentions, then there are people who have these incredibly orgasmic spiritual moments of enlightenment, to go on journeys, they enter all this craziness with what essentially is pain, for example. Now, in that scenario, like the belt is just another form of toy or a riding crop, like in, you know, 50 Shades, although it's not the best example of conscious kink, but you know, and it's the same with a vibrator or a dildo or a cock ring, whatever. It's all about the intentionality with which it's used.
Right. Could either both of you or just one of you share a sexual fantasy that you had that has come true?
Probably both. Okay, I'll do mine real quick. I manifest things through my orgasms, and I manifested a situation. I had a fantasy about having a threesome with two guys. And I really wanted it to be respectful, like I wanted it to be beautiful, wanted to be lots of communication, and I wanted me to be the center of attention. Yeah, and I made that happen. I was in a really beautiful like friends with benefits situation with a man last year. And again, like full open communication around it. And this opportunity just like arose. I already had spoken to him about it. And I was like, oh, la, la, la. And then just ta-da. And it was really cute. It was super gorgeous, you know, and I've had other fantasies that are like really into kink and everything like that. But this was probably one of just the most beautiful, because there was so much respect. These were two friends. Like they were like fist pumping and high-fiving. They were like, yes. And I had a great time too. I think it was, yeah, one of those things that me, like as in me when I was inside a marriage or, you know, in very traditional relationships, I kind of would be in the back of my mind, but I never thought it would happen. And it was
Right.
just done really respectfully, even though it wasn't inside a partnership. And I really loved that I got to have an experience where I could have firsthand evidence of how you can still have gorgeous connection and intimacy outside of that traditional framework. So yeah.
Right. Was it as good as you thought it would be?
It was really good. I mean, like I orgasmed a lot, but I generally do anyway. It was really beautiful. To be honest, I kind of like to experience it again and bring in things like kink and power exchange. And now that I understand a lot more about myself, yeah, it is something that I would like to explore further. But it was beautiful for like my first experience. Yeah, it was really cool and so outside both of their comfort zone. So I was like, the next day, I was like, so fucking proud of you guys.
Yeah, fair. Do you think you'll do it with the same people? Do you think you'd want to just expand and try, like, put yourself in a new situation with new people?
Yeah, it would be a new situation just because I know that like this particular man, I'm not sleeping with him anymore. He's got a girlfriend. But also he definitely, and like no judgment on this, but was more like vanilla flavored sex. Like that was the most outrageous thing he'd done. He'd been in a marriage for a long time. And so I would like to probably in the future experience it more with someone that has similar interests that I do when it comes to sex, which wouldn't be with them. Yeah.
Right. And like sex life in majority of relationships can become like fairly mundane and like routine, like same way, same time, you know, same position, same flavors.
Mhm.
Like, how can couples spice things up? Like, what advice would you give them?
Oh, you can answer this, Johnson, because we've done really awesome conversations around fantasy and like the quizzes and all that kind of stuff. Do you want to give some top tips on that?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I said this before, right? It's about being sexual, not performing sex. So it might sound a bit boring, but that's the place to start, is connecting with your sexual energy. If you're in a partnership, your partner connecting with their sexual energy as well, sexuality, which you can encourage, but you can't do, right? Because we're not responsible for other people's behaviors or actions or decisions.
Right.
But if assuming that you've both connected somewhat to your own sexuality, it's then honestly having conversation. Communication is so key when it comes to everything sex and partnership. So if you can have open and honest communication, and it's baby steps. So let's just say, for example, we'll use that example of the threesome, just because Kitty's just used it. But let's say two people were in partnership and one person had a fantasy about having a threesome, right? And we kind of mentioned earlier about there's potential fear about what's my partner's reaction going to be. Let's just say that you both agree to have a conversation where there's no judgment, no shame, not take anything personally, and just share. And one person might say something like, the idea of another body being involved in sex has always fascinated me. You don't have to jump straight into acting out the full-on real-life fantasy of that. So let's incorporate the sex toy that you were talking about before. You can buy a dildo, for example, relatively cheap. You can use your mind, use your imagination, get that sexual energy flowing between the two of you, and you can use that as a prop that is like an imaginary other, say, penis being involved. That's like a gentle baby step towards that fantasy taking place, but without having to go through the process of getting another human and doing all the communication and negotiation, and because that's a full-on leap, right? So it's about thinking through, like, okay, how can we bring in certain physical sensations of that, or certain elements of it that intrigue us without judgment, without the jealousy of another person being involved in that particular example? And what tools do we have on the buffet that we could use to kind of dip our toes into this? I've often encouraged people with fantasies to, if for whatever reason they're not comfortable with actually taking the leap and doing it, is while sexually connected with their partner, whether that's penetrative sex, oral sex, kissing, hugging, massage, whatever, speaking out the fantasy. Oh, Tell me more. Like,
Yeah.
what happens next in your mind?
Mm.
You know?
Right.
And there's no harm, no foul in that. It's not actually happening. It's just connecting with fantasy, and fantasy exists outside the physical realm, right? It's in our mind, it's in our spirit, whatever. You can play with that stuff, and it's all energy. You can bring that stuff into sex without running the risk of the other person being involved, or it actually hurting, or needing to go buy the expensive sex toys and maybe not liking it. And you can get a pretty good idea being intimate with your partner and kind of having that dirty talk, if you like, and talking out the fantasy while you're canoodling. You can often get a pretty good sense as to whether that's maybe a direction you want to maybe head down more, or you go, hey, thanks very much for showing up in that and trusting me with that. And that was really cool that we shared that experience together. Didn't actually turn me on as much as I thought it would. So maybe that dildo gets used once, and maybe threesomes are not for us, whatever, you know. But that's a gentle opening that people in relationships can try. That's pretty effective.
The other thing that we've recommended before, and I have used, and also you have, Johnson, really successfully, is the carnal calibration test.
Yeah.
So that is fantastic for couples that would like to, and we've spoken about this, it's not as an avenue to not openly communicate, it's as a tool to then lead into discussions. But in that, you answer a whole lot of questions, and you can choose whether you want those to be in all of the categories, you know, whether it's kink or non-monogamy or, you know, public sex, whatever. You can take out any of those that you want to, and then you can look at the different levels of sexuality within that. However, what happens is that you two individually do that quiz, and you'll have a no, yes, or maybe, and then you get the answers, and it only shows the things that you have both said you're interested in or might be interested in. So yeah, like threesomes, for example, if I say yes and my potential partner says no, it won't show up. So there's no like shame in that. You can kind of eliminate the things that they're a definite hard no to, but the things that are maybe will still be there. Great conversation starter. I literally use this. If I'm thinking about going into a connection with someone who've already established something, I'll ask them to do that before we even have sex the first time. Like there's a couple of things that I'm like, hey, this would be really helpful. Erotic blueprint quiz, love language quiz, carnal calibration. It's fucking great. You might both realize that you want to, you know, like fuck out in public and you didn't know. You could have been married for 20 years and you're like, we could have been fucking at all the restaurants.
All the bathrooms, the elevators.
Yeah, I'm into that. So got distracted. Yeah, those kinds of things. There's so many really cool tools out there that are available. And, you know, like we say, not to take away from having the very vulnerable, open conversations, but to use as a tool. Really, really handy.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, if you could send the links, I'll put them on this podcast as well, because I want to check that out as well. It'd just be very helpful for everyone, right? Like just to know where we connect and where we don't connect, and just it almost sets up like parameters and boundaries. And as Johnson says, it shows us what we are allowed in the buffet.
Yeah.
As well. So, my friend's girlfriend, she says that watching porn is cheating. What are your thoughts on this or on that specifically? And are there like other types of cheating besides just physical intercourse with another person?
This is so specific to your partnership. It all comes down to what Johnson spoke about before with intention. If the parameter of your relationship has been identified as that not being healthy, well, then it's not healthy. But it all comes down to conversations around it. Like it sounds like in that dynamic that there isn't an aligning of values and there hasn't been appropriate communication and respect around it to go into it. So when it comes to, I will say a couple of things. Like we are like big advocates for ethical porn being used in a healthy, respectful way within a dynamic and with yourself personally. I'm a big advocate for that. Right. However, a lot of the mainstream porn we've got to be very, very careful with in terms of the body image, in terms of most commonly the way that women are viewed in that, in terms of the orgasm gap that comes up in that. Really, like, there's so many things that you really need to be conscious of when you're looking at things like porn. If you are hiding something from your partner, it doesn't matter what the fuck it is, that's disrespectful. You know, if there is any kind of shame around it, like I say to people, go into it with open conversation. Like, you know, I think that Johnson has spoke about how him and Mrs. Johnson have had times when they'll watch porn together. It's all about what you value and what you find within your relationship is this or that. And that comes outside of not just porn, but everything when it comes to cheating. Just, you've got to take radical responsibility for yourself and have that open communication. Like, emotional cheating, abso-fucking-lutely. Like, you can say we didn't fuck, but it's like, man, if you both knew that you were having loving feelings and it went past a boundary that what you know was not okay, well, then it was cheating. It's going like, what framework do you have? And this is why it's fascinating when we go into the conversations around, say, dominance and submission, non-monogamy, any of these things, because often people that are in those spaces actually have better communication than people in vanilla and traditional relationships, because you have to. If you're tied up in a corner and they're about to drip hot wax on you, like, your communication has got to be onto it. You have to have your voice, you have to speak your truths. And I think there's so much for people to learn from those spaces, which is why we're doing the episodes on it. Because yeah, you've got to know what feels good to you. And is that coming from fear or love? Again, like, are you not wanting your partner to look at porn out of fear or out of love? Are they doing it out of fear or out of curiosity? You know, they might be getting some handy tips, or they might be using it as a form of addiction, which it can be as well. There's so many variables within that.
Yeah. Even like from my experience being in a space, working with energy, working with healing, working with people, it's so open, and there's almost like a loving presence there, but there's also like an insecurity. So being in a space like that, you almost need to be very mindful of the way that you are interacting, and the boundaries that you're abiding by, because just being in that space, and I'm sure maybe you've probably definitely experienced this, Kitty, is like when you're healing, when you're with people healing, or just being vulnerable, offering a space for people, you can almost feel like an energetic connection there, and then you just become mindful of it, and like, wow, like how do you work through that? Because I'm, stepping into a space similar to what you're doing with the energy and the healing. So how do you go about managing boundaries and working with that energy and that sexual attraction to the energy?
Yeah, it's a really gorgeous conversation that Johnson and I have spoken a lot about, particularly in launching this business. And we speak about it when we start off every workshop, is that today we are probably, hopefully, going to feel some pleasurable sensations. We're going to be working with sexual energy. That's the difference between sexuality and sexual energy and acting upon sex. Sexual energy, my belief, in Johnson, I'm sure you're the same, I know you're the same, is sexual energy is a healing tool. It's a healing modality. It is an energy that sits at a very potent frequency. I channel it every single one of my Reiki sessions. I just do. It channels in through my body, whether they've got sexual trauma or not. That doesn't matter. It's so potent. And so we speak about that in that framework. When I go into my other business, I have a lot of male clients, and not that they would be the only ones there might be some kind of feelings around it, but I'm very conscious of my body language, of my communication, of the way that I would communicate with them outside of just, say, that session with them. Like, I know if there is something there, and it kind of sits in that dance of, I believe that it's important for us to hold space for people enough so they feel felt and heard and appreciated. And with that does come that kind of connection, which would never mean that anything would need to be acted upon. And I have had some situations where I've had to put some boundaries in place, and that's fine. Like, send love to that. But I think it's just taking radical responsibility and knowing, like, look, this is a facilitator client experience. However, it's not like those mainstream areas, like counseling and therapy sessions and stuff like that, where they often do hold themselves back a lot more. We have the ability to be more human, I believe, in these spaces, because that's what these people need. So I think it's communication, really coming into yourself and knowing that if any situations arose, that you can communicate with respect as well.
Yeah, beautifully articulated. So, just the final two questions that I love to ask, I guess, is Johnson, I'll ask you this question: is what are you most proud of doing in this life?
Wow, that's a biggie. That's a biggie. I think it's funny. So I'm gonna preface my answer. Well, I suppose it's part of my answer, really. And I mentioned this on the podcast at one point too, that by the age of 27, I was the CEO of an airline. Now, a few years ago, I would have said that with a real arrogant pride. Now, I say that actually as a bit of a pivot point, because I was actually at the lowest point in my life. So what I'm most proud of actually is stepping out of that addiction to labels and money and the rat race and physical possessions and status, and going through a real, and I'm sure I've got a long way to go on this journey as well, but developing a humility, as Kitty calls it, a radical responsibility for my patterns of behavior, the way I treat people, the way I view the world, showing up in love. And I think all of that came from a place of being, really for the first time in my life, being radically authentic with myself. And that involved connecting with who I truly was. Because you can have all the labels and you can have all the physical stuff and the fast car and all the money in the bank and 25 Bitcoin on your digital wallet and a massive mansion in Remuera and all the shit, but not be connected to yourself. And a tree can be identified pretty easily by the fruit that it bears. Can be a massive tree, and if it's producing rotten fruit, it's a shit tree, And so I think that journey that I've, and Kitty's been a massive part of that. And so I have an immense gratitude for her too, standing beside me in the space, and Mrs. Johnson and my mother, to name a few people. So, like, ironically, I think what I would have said a few years ago that I was most proud of is potentially now what I'd view as the lowest point, and it's the journey since then that I'm most proud of, and that's that connecting to my authentic self, and now being in a position where, and this is a massive risk for us, like it's a new business. The podcast is new. Like, we're not churning out heaps of money. We're not living the high life, but it's so rewarding stepping into a place where we're seeing other people being able to connect to themselves, we're watching the shame just wash off people and becoming more liberated and enjoying their sexual selves and their connection with others and their relationships. And honestly, that's worth all the money in the world. And I'm really proud to be here, let's be honest, just at the start of this journey, standing next to an amazing friend and business partner in Kitty and an amazing partner in Mrs. Johnson. And I hope that as my kids grow up, that's a lesson that or an example I'm able to set that I wasn't standing in a position to a couple of years ago.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. Yeah, nothing beats love. I think when you really know yourself, when you get to the core essence, it's just love, like unconditional love, like what it means to be love and experience love. I think we've forgotten what it's like to give love and to be love and to express love. And thank you for sharing that, man. Long may your journey continue, and long may it flourish. I'm just when you were saying all of that, I was just picturing everything you were saying, and just put me in a great space. So thank you.
You're welcome. And just before Kitty, because I'm sure she's going to wrap things up in a beautiful, eloquent way as she does, I just want to honor you as well. What I've really felt talking to you today, even before we went on air, when you and I were having a conversation, was a gentle spirit, but a really strong and powerful one as well. And I think it's clear just in the short time that we've spent talking that you're making the world a better place by holding these spaces. You come across as really authentic, genuine, like I said, just gentle spirited, loving, and yeah, the two big words I got was there's a strength and a power in that as well. So I want to publicly honor you for that. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, my man.
Yeah, much love. I appreciate that. Thank you. And so I guess this is for you, Kitty. And I like to ask these two questions always on the show because I want to celebrate people, and I want people to celebrate themselves. We start to normalize like self-celebration and just honoring ourselves and the accomplishments that we've had in our lives, and sharing that with the world and others. So what is your hope for the world and for future generations?
Oh, well, you just said it, is for us to remember that we were born love and that we return to love, and that our journey here is to remember that we were born worthy of everything in this lifetime, worthy of abundance, worthy of joy and bliss and ecstasy and connection, and all of these things that truly, truly are the essence of what we are. I spent a decade working with children, and babies are not born knowing or thinking that there's something wrong with them. They are never born thinking that they don't deserve everything in the world. And these layers just fall upon us in our lifetimes from so many places that try and tell us that we are not completely whole in ourselves. And my truest desire is for every single person to know that they are complete, that they have everything that they need. And I continue to come back to this analogy when it comes to love, is that I think if we all endeavor on this journey to know ourselves, accept ourselves, appreciate ourselves, then what happens is that our hearts are so full that there is a natural overflow that tips onto everyone around us. It touches our family and friends and people we're in relationships with, our projects, our businesses, all of these things. It just becomes this overflow of unconditional love and appreciation, but it has to come from ourselves. And if we are trying to pour from a cup that is half empty, then we can never find ourselves. We can never discover that self-actualization. And I know it's fucking hard. Like, I'm going to say that I know that it is challenging and that there is some discomfort in going into the harsh places of self-reflection and doubt and fear and all those places. But from lived experience, it is 100% worth it. And I have had to go through some intense really fucking intense experiences in my life. I was born pretty much with the idea that I'm unworthy, that I'm not worthy of love. And the world would change. The world would change. Connections would change. The way that we see nature would change. We would see the beauty and all the sunsets and then the birds, and everything becomes so much more beautiful when it is coming from an overflow of self-love. And it's a big fucking dream, but I am committing my whole life to it.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I want to thank you both for your time today. Kitty and Johnson, my ex podcast, just a phenomenal conversation
Yeah.
to have. And I love your voice, Kitty. I think I've been listening to it throughout the podcast, and I think the listeners will probably will definitely agree with me. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight, your wisdom. Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and your energy with me and those who are tuning in. So I wish you well, many blessings, much love, and long may it continue.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you guys. It's an absolute honor to be in this space with two phenomenal men in the world. It feels really special. Thank you.